throughout my Sonic reviews that I've made, one thing stands true for each and every one of them. Although the majority of the zones in the review will be negative, there's never been a game that has no good zone whatsoever. That's still not the case, but it definitely isn't the polar opposite either. Sonic CD was, and still is, the undisputed, unchanging worst game within the tetralogy. And with the entrance of Sonic Superstars in 2023, that unfortunately didn't change. Everything about the game is just so different from the main 3 games in classic Sonic. The title, the level design, even simple game structure like having Act 3 be a boss act. It's all so unfamiliar and not in a good way. From the weird time traveling gimmick to the utter disregarding of what Sonic 1 had set down in terms of gameplay, allow me to explain why exactly I hate Sonic CD. Starting us off, we have Palm Tree Panic. It certainly is a place of palm trees and a social panic since the game has started and it won't be ending for a while. Seriously though, I don't have much of a problem when it comes to Palm Tree Panic. The exploration scene in the zone is fantastic if you're trying to take it slow, and if you're attempting to reach breakneck speeds, then each and every one of the acts has a speed tree monitor at the start. It's honestly a good start to Sonic CD in most regards. Yes, the enemies can be especially annoying if you do decide to go at a faster rate, and the butterflies can blend in with the background, but if we're talking level design, gimmicks, music, and overall quality, Palm Tree Panic is hands down one of the best zones in Sonic CD. That is until we get to the horrible boss fight. Sonic CD is infamous for its very unusual boss fights, but this one in particular has to be one of the worst boss fights that is generally known. You have space behind it, the ability to 3-shot it even though it's not a mini-boss, and all in all, there's not much to be said about it. It's just a horrible boss with an ugly design. Well, I mean, at least in the case of Sonic 2, the grace period was up until Aquatic Ruin. But in this game's case, there's no soothing beginning period, because after a pretty decently designed level, and an admittedly not so great boss fight, we go straight into one of the most poorly designed levels I've ever seen executed. Sure, the background is very pleasing, especially how vibrant the future looks, and the music isn't anything I'd say is bad, but on the other hand, the level design in this zone is absolutely abysmal, no matter which way you put it. At random sections of the level, there'll be huge areas which are completely empty except they actually aren't empty and are filled to the brim with what I can only describe as one-time spring yard bumpers. And yes, this does make them less annoying to deal with, however it balances out with the quantity of these stupid things that halt movement. So much so that you literally can't think of Collision Chaos without this horrible gimmick in mind. And even so, that's not where the horrors end. When you combine this already bad mechanics with extreme open level design, so much so that falling from the top to the bottom is a possibility, with somehow still being able to get stuck in areas like this one area with a time sign and a loop, extremely heard of asset users like bumpers being all over the ground towards the end of blacks, annoying enemies who blend into the background considering this level also loves to launch into orbit without much warning, and some stupid level design choices outright, like putting spike balls that rotate next to enemies that shoot at you, you can see why things aren't all too good for Sonic CD. And to conclude a horrible level, why not use a very horrible boss? This Sonic Spinball clone needs to be studied because the boss itself has nothing to do with skill. Half the time you're just trying your absolute best to try and not fall to the bottom and use the bumpers properly, which is nigh impossible. And after you finally get up to him, he doesn't even put up a fight. You just hit him 3 times and it's over. Moving on from Collision Chaos being, well, a chaos of collisions, we're moving on to the water level in Sonic CD. And unfortunately, this zone doesn't get to join in with all the good water levels from the classic Sonic games. Oops, wrong music, let me change that. And hey, if you know anything about me and my channel, you'll know I have a soft spot for water levels when it comes to classic Sonic. I mean, in my opinion, Nitro City is literally the best zone in Sonic 3, and I'm quite well known for being the one guy who likes Labyrinth Zone. But this zone doesn't get the same treatment, because it has all the bad aspects of every water level we've reviewed so far. It's very slow and also extremely confusing, often having you restart entire sections over again because you missed a jump, or having you do things over and over again if you don't know what you're doing. When you combine that with not having a clue on why some certain sections are completely cut off even though you think that's the only logical way for you to go, and the extremely annoying enemies that shoot out literal pixels for attacks, you have the worst case scenario. And it doesn't get all too much better after reaching the boss. To begin, you start chasing this guy around the level where you either kill him or just let him run, and it's not necessarily a bad addition, but I've always seen it as irritating because there's no real reason for it to be there other than to show off how odd Eggman looks in this game. And the boss fight itself is absolute bonkers. Look, I'll always criticize boss fights if water has anything to do with them, because there really isn't a need for it in that section of a zone. I'm looking at Tidal Tempest and the way the boss works, it doesn't really take much to understand that I don't like this boss. Now I will say that the boss is definitely better than the horrible excuse for a boss in Palm Tree Panic, and the frustratingly hard pinball based one in Collision Chaos, but it definitely isn't winning any rewards either, because it's not being offensive but not trying to be better. Alright, next off we have a sort of pit stop before things get ugly again. Quartz Quadrant, the fourth zone in Sonic CD, is genuinely one of the better applications of Sonic CD's exploration, where past and future signs can be found relatively easy, and the main focus of exploration isn't just for them. Yes, there still are some glaring issues like some random sections that have no purpose for a conveyor belt, but some applications are very innovative. Next up is something I've actually talked about way back in my Sonic 1 review, it's the stunning visuals that the zone has. The underground area at the beginning of Act 1 is one of the most memorable sections of the zone, and the outside looks even better. Surprisingly though, none of the features look visually appealing. The enemies on the floor are especially annoying however, with some slowing you down, but it's nothing you can't avoid with proper knowledge and it really isn't a bad thing to have. And the music is one of the best in the game, being very recognizable and having a great entrance into the main part of the song. So overall, Quartz Quadrant being the two acts are good. Problems, but that's expected and they aren't overwhelming. But sadly, the zone just had to conclude with a boss that does nothing. You can't hit the boss, all you do is run and dodge obstacles, and at the end of the day, you aren't even the one to beat him, his stupid machine just overheats. Truly one of the worst bosses in classic Sonic, and the only reason why it isn't just the worst is because there are some later boss fights in the game that are completely bad and significantly important. And we're already back to absolute terror, and oh my goodness. After all of this time, I've finally gotten to talk about the zone again after the last time I did over 10 months ago on the Blue Blur, my older channel. And I have to say, with no doubt in my mind whatsoever, that Wacky Workbench is one of the worst things I have ever played. The entire gimmick of the level is that you need to get to the bottom of the level while avoiding the plenty floors that cover up the floor. The only real platforming you need to do is at the very top of the level, and you can fall a very long way down. The main problem I have with the zone is that it changes up the main formula of Sonic so much that it becomes horrible. Like, seriously? This zone gets very frustrating with its electric machines and the gameplay is absolutely horrendous. I don't have a problem with innovations on the classic Sonic formula, as long as it has the main components any other Sonic zone would have, but I feel like Sonic City's worst zone in the game is just a bad idea brought to life when thinking of a gimmick. But despite that, there is a redeeming factor that doesn't make the zone completely horrible, and it's the boss fight. For the majority of Sonic CD, good boss fights aren't easy to come by. I mean, look at the last one. But while it definitely isn't anything crazy, it doesn't exactly have any glaring issues, and the whole thing with pressing blocks was always pretty cool to me. Surely the best zone in the game wouldn't come right after the worst one, right? Like seriously, like there's no way. Bruh. Fortunately, the penultimate zone in Sonic CD is genuinely one of the unexpectedly best zones I've ever played, not being limited to just Sonic CD. To start off, the level design doesn't have the problem most zones in Sonic CD have, and it's a good level. But to be completely honest, there are glaring problems with the level design, so it's not perfect, or even great. For example, the extremely maze-like portions where you need to navigate your way through tubes that have you make split-second decisions. These make exploring the zone a lot more tedious than in other zones because you need to memorize a certain route just to see another part of the level, and basically anything that can hurt you in any way isn't done correctly. This applies not only to the enemies either, the blue spike balls are a nuisance. But other than that, there aren't any problems with the level design. It's very fast and just open enough so a lot of the time you'll bounce through the air, and mostly not worry about having an unseeable obstacle get in your way. Aside from having good level design in general, Stardust Speedway is also known for having the best music in the entirety of Sonic CD. To say that is really tough, considering when we're talking about Sonic CD from a wider scope and perspective, the main thing Sonic CD actually has going for it that is very solid is its soundtrack. I don't even need to say anything at all. Sure, the present track is the worst of them all, but it's still extremely good. Plus, that doesn't matter because the bad feature is peak music from this game. But unfortunately, we have to end off the best zone in the game with the best boss in the game? Yeah, Metal Sonic is so creative and at the same time, you're not flabbergasted and shocked when the boss first starts. I mean, Sonic is known for his speed, and there's a metal version of Sonic. The only real way to test who's better would just be a race. And just like any metal version would, Metal Sonic doesn't exactly play the fairs, seeing as how you can't disrupt him but he disrupts you. It's very expected once you see it, it's so unexpected before you see it and I love it. The race isn't linear either. There are branching pathways and areas you can use to collect rings to stay alive for a price of some time. I used to think the game would be a bit lenient on you, but no. You've got to prioritize your speed over your health because Eggman has an instant death laser and a few mistakes could seriously trip you up. All in all, a combination of good level design, banger music, and one of the most memorable boss fights in the series makes Stardust Speedway the undoubted best zone in the game. Alright, the fight with the guy on the box art of the game, and one of the two things taken from the game wasn't the final fight to the game, even though we saved Amy at the end, making the goal already accomplished. This game is weird. Metallic Madness, the actual final zone in Sonic CD, isn't really doing anything to make Sonic CD end off on a good note. But, to be completely fair, the music in the zone is of the better tracks in the game. So much so that when comparing the Mania remix of Stardust Speedway to the track of Metallic Madness wins very easily, even in both acts because it's that good of a song. But for Sonic CD, it stays in second place, which again isn't a bad thing by any means. However, that's about where the pleasantries end with the zone because the level design doesn't continue with the philosophy of Stardust Speedway's more speed-focused level design, but rather leans back towards the maze-like levels like Collision Chaos and Tidal Tempest have. And it makes exploration not a viable thing to do. Having mini sections where your character becomes very tiny is a very cool gimmick, but aside from having smaller entrances to areas where you can only access using the leader that shrinks you, no real gimmicks are made using this. And the worst part is, this isn't even the worst part of the zone. The absolute worst part of the zone, heck, the whole game is Metallic Madness's boss, because of the sheer amount of disappointment this presents. First of all, the Act 3 portion of the final act is especially frustrating, considering this one is the only one that you can not only get crushed in, but there's also a bottomless pit, something not very common in Sonic CD. I get that it's the final act of the final zone and it's supposed to be difficult, but the combination of bumpers, platformers that spin around, and springs are extremely messy, and there really isn't much anyone can say about that. Next up, we have the Stardust Speedway Firefly mini-boss, and it's okay. Not anything crazy, but considering nobody who saw this for the first time was expecting it, and there's nothing really all that bad about it, I'll let it pass. But the main boss is the worst part of the game, and one of the most objective things that people can't defend when talking about Sonic CD as a whole. Sonic 1's final boss was average, the boss fight itself wasn't challenging, but having no rings and the amazing music balanced it out just a bit. Sonic 2's final boss was just a final boss, difficult turned easy after finding a reliable pattern. So it's just average as well. Sonic 3 and Knuckles' final fight was bad for the first section and good for the second section. And with amazing visuals and the good music, it's pretty good. But Sonic CD has the worst final boss I've reviewed yet, and it isn't even close. Firstly, the boss doesn't look cool at all, losing any visual appeal whatsoever. The atmosphere doesn't fit with the dramatic music. And you know what the dramatic fusion doesn't fit with either? Yeah, the fact that the boss takes 4 hits. To put how foolish this is into perspective, a mini-boss from Sonic 3 and Knuckles takes most of the time 5 hits to beat, and every normal boss takes 8. This boss, not a mini-boss, isn't just any boss, no. This is supposed to be the final boss in the entire game, and it takes less hits to beat than Fire Breath from Angel Island. When you combine this with the fact that even though the boss doesn't have health, it's really annoying to fight, and there was supposed to be a secret final boss that you could only get after collecting all the 7 time stones, we can see why this is such a bad thing for the zone. And finally, the last thing I have to talk about, and also the last thing that Sonic CD has that unexpectedly is one of the best implementations of it in the Sonic formula, it's the Sonic CD special stages. To access the special stages in the game, you have to reach the end of Act 1 or Act 2 with 50 rings, and afterwards a giant ring will appear. It's exactly like Sonic 1 in that regard, and there really shouldn't be too much of a problem to get it in every act. After you get into the giant ring, you enter a pseudo 3D space where you need to pop 6 UFOs to acquire the time stone. Different UFOs have different drops, and there's even a time UFO that spawns in if you're at 20 seconds or lower. And honestly, it is extremely fun to play. The main structure is super simple, but it comes together to make a very good special stage that's possible for me to play for fun. One major thing it does wrong, however, is its difficulty. For the first 4 stages, the difficulty gradually increases, but afterwards, the idea of making it harder is just having the UFOs move unexpectedly. And of course, like most special stages, the 6th one is way harder than any other one. But other than that, Sonic CD's special stages are overall great, being debatably the best special stage from the classic Sonic games. And that is Sonic CD, and also the end of the classic Sonic reviews. I have been working towards this for a long time. To be completely honest, I didn't even know I was gonna make a whole classic Sonic review series with everything. When I first started with my Defending Labyrinth Zone video, I expected to make Defending Labyrinth Zone, then I would make Defending Metropolis, and then I would not defend Zandopolis, and I wouldn't defend Wacky Workbench. That's why in the beginning of the Defending Labyrinth Zone video, I kind of generalized my opinion and reviewed Sonic 1 really briefly. I don't think anything would have happened to my channel if I went through with that, and the only reason why I decided to make a Spring Yard video afterwards was because I mentioned it at the end of the video and why Spring Yard is the worst Sonic 1 level. And then after that, everything just went. Like, thank you guys so much. I have no idea what I'm gonna do after this. I've always said that I wanted to finish it, but I've really not thought about what I'm gonna do afterwards. Probably I'm going to make a Sonic Superstars review. I most likely won't make a Mania review because it's just gonna be really hard to review, you know? Sonic Superstars review will not be coming anytime soon. I'm just gonna say it. I'm not reviewing another game really soon. I do want to do some challenges, but I mostly just want to move on to more modern Sonic stuff, and for that, I'm gonna have to complete all the modern Sonic games. So I might take a little break after this, but I'm not really sure. Either way, thank you guys so much for watching the video. If you have not seen the entire playlist of all the reviews I've done, there should be a link in the description. If you enjoyed the content, make sure to leave a like and subscribe, and have a good day or night wherever you are.
Leather legs, get in booty. What do you get? Say, back in.